we can, through transit investment, alleviate or reduce some of the congestion in Toronto. And I want to be very clear about what we're going to see over the next 25 years in Toronto. Congestion, at best, is going to stay the same. And when I say at best, I mean if we were to do everything right in terms of a combination of whether you believe in road building or transit investment, this city is growing by 1 million people over the next 25 years. The region is going to grow by another 1 million, so there's going to be 2 million people in the region. And anybody who believes that you're going to have a reduction in congestion totally during that time, it's just not being realistic. So I think what the debate really is how can we prevent, I guess, what was it, we talked about Los Angeles, there was Carmageddon that I guess was announced a couple months ago when they had one of the lanes of the expressway shut down. And how can we here in the GTA really prevent Carmageddon from coming to Toronto and being a permanent state? We already know we have the longest transit commutes, although I think some people would look at some of how the numbers are calculated, but the numbers don't really matter. Whether you spend, 60 minutes in traffic or 65 or 70 minutes, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, our business in Toronto are losing billions of dollars. People are spending long time in commute, and really there's been a frustration over the last 20 or 30 years of a failure of all levels of governments to really address this. In Toronto, it's kind of a unique example, not fully unique. It probably shares the stage with cities like New York and Montreal in a North American context from being a successful public transit city. We have about 198 per capita trips on public transit. That would compare to some of the European cities that are Hong Kong, which should have about 350 to 400, to give you some perspective. If you go to Mississauga, our friends just to the west, that number drops to about 40, and if you get up to some of the places like Guelph, that might go down to 7, 8 per capita. So it gives you some perspective of how we're doing here in Toronto, and really it's a pretty accurate way of measuring whether people want to use public transit. Of course, we also haven't had any new highways. A brand new highway has not opened in Toronto since the early 1970s when the stub of the Allen, which was to be the Spadina extension, was opened. And anybody who believes that you're going to be able to bulldoze, 4, 8, whatever lanes through a corridor in Toronto, when we've sold off most of the corridor space that was to be used for highways, is just not being realistic. So I guess partly where I'm going on this is whether or not you love to sit in your car, air-conditioned, with your iPod, all of that going. The reality is we're not really in a context here in the GTA where you can build more highways. And if you did build new highways, if you managed to double the DVP, you'd get double the amount of cars. They'd hit Richmond Street, and you're not going to bulldoze 50-story condo buildings into Richmond in order to get those cars into the core. And if you did, you also, and that's why we haven't seen an increase in the number of cars coming into the downtown core since the mid-1970s, you wouldn't be able to put them anywhere because there are less parking spots today than there were in the 1970s. So no matter how much you wanted to, you wouldn't be able to do it. Now, the downtown is not the only part of the GTA, of course, and this is part of where the discussion really needs to go across how we're going to accommodate passengers going from Richmond Hill to Mississauga, maybe never wanting to come downtown. And that's where really the debate has to come. Although I would suggest to you that bulldozing corridors through those communities are also going to be possible, and no government is going to do it, which means we're into a debate on how we're going to use our existing roads more efficiently and how we're going to build public transit in order to carry it. Because when we have built public transit, it's worked. In fact, Toronto is almost a perfect case when you look at a satellite image of Toronto and you look at where the condos are, for the most part. There are mistakes, and they're around subway stations. And you can follow the Yonge line up by looking at its densities. We haven't been perfect on this, and we need more work on the Bloor-Danforth line, but the YUS line, the Yonge University Spadina line, can carry upwards of 55,000 people per hour. I'm talking both lines, 32, 33,000 for the Yonge line, 20-some thousand. I see Mitch Stamber's here from the TTC could probably correct me exactly on those numbers, but you have somewhere around 55,000 people who are coming into the downtown core from TTC alone, and it's worked. So this city has had a public transit networks go. Transit went from 1 million to people in 1967 to 60 to 7 million today. So public transit in the city works. People will use it if they're given it. We saw this last year with the expansion of the bus service. Ridership is at a record high here in Toronto. So there's really a lot of success here. We're going to have a chance to talk about more of this over the next 45 minutes because there are so many good success stories here. We need to build on that success in order to make Toronto a livable city. Any other path just is not going to work.